Welcome to Industry Viewpoints, a video series brought to you by the American Bankruptcy Institute. In our programs, we feature experts providing views on the current state of affairs of particular industries or key issues with a focus on what may lie ahead. Filmed at ABI's Winter Leadership Conference, my guest on this special edition of Industry Viewpoints is Jeffrey Berman, Senior Managing Director at Development Specialists, Inc. in Los Angeles, where the conference is being held. Jeff brings us over 40 years of experience in all types of insolvency case administrations, with a particular emphasis on assignments for the benefit of creditors and, of course, post-confirmation estate management. Jeff is the author of a book published by ABI on assignments for the benefit of creditors, or as they're known as ABCs, and his 5th edition of the book has just been released. Jeff, thank you for taking your time to join us, and I must confess that ABCs are something I don't know a whole much about, but for starters, let me ask you this. What is new in the world of ABCs that folks out there ought to know about?
Well, first, Bill, thank you for the invitation to join you in this. What is new in ABCs is really a continuation of states looking at their laws and trying to modernize the practice of assignments. Understand that assignments for the benefit of creditors, or ABCs, if we'll just use that to shorten it, are all state law governed. So it's the equivalent to, and we like to say it's sort of like a Chapter 7, but it's state law governed. So it's not bankruptcy code governed. And we use that phrase a lot when we're talking to boards and other people who don't understand it, because they typically know what a Chapter 7 is. They don't know what an ABC is.
Yeah.
So what's happening now is states have started really going back almost 20 years to look at their statutory schemes and say, do we like them or do we want to change them? And beginning in 2004, Washington State went away from the assignment concept and moved to a receivership.
Oh.
Minnesota did that in 2013, 2014, led by Mike Stewart at the Faegre firm. And they too liked the receivership concept.
Why?
What Mike told me was they liked the Washington statute, and their legislature thought that that was better than this amorphous ABC assignee concept, which most lawyers get about 3 minutes in a bankruptcy course about. And if you see it in a commercial lease that says the making of an assignment for the benefit of creditors is an event of default. Next.
Yeah.
Most recently, North Carolina, as of January 1st of this year, repealed its assignment statute and turned their statutes completely to a receivership.
Well, now tell me this. Other than calling it a receivership, when they're adopting these new laws in states, how is it substantively different?
Depends on the state. You go to Louisiana, and it has one statute on assignments. The assignee has the rights of a lien creditor as of the making of assignment. It's when they passed the revised Uniform Commercial Code in 2001. Delaware, an old statute but highly utilized. North Carolina.
Why is it highly utilized? Because nobody's actually headquartered in Delaware.
Because creditors have become accustomed to a court. The debtor's in trouble. It's a bankruptcy. Okay, well, this is not a bankruptcy. Oh, but there's a court, and it's Delaware, and we know Delaware is a good place to be. We know Delaware law.
What, do they do it in the Delaware Chancery Court or in a different court?
Chancery Court, the state court. So it's the courts of Chancery
which is an equity court, if I recall correctly.
It is an equity court, and it's using statutes that go back into the 40s and 50s, if I have my dates correct. But it's a place where creditors take comfort that there's a judge, there's a fiduciary, and there's a process.
And it's in a court that people respect.
Yes. You go to a state that is not court supervised, California, Illinois, Texas to a degree, which doesn't seem any anymore. They're not court supervised.
Really?
Yep. California repealed its statutes as a scheme in 1978. And the statutes are all over about 6 codes. And you have to know where to look to find what rule applies. Illinois, same thing, common law. Massachusetts, it has 3 statutes. They run into the probate court, because you get a judge who knows how to deal with a body of assets, but everybody uses common law.
I'll be doing.
Go to Florida, court supervised, strong statute, well developed, with a court that understands what an assignment is.
Well, are there some states where it's easier to get the job done?
Depending on what the facts are, yes. Again, if I can take an assignment under California law, if the facts justify it, rather than going to Delaware, anytime.
Oh, really?
Sure. Because, look, I want to sell assets of a failed company. If I'm in Delaware, I have to first get 2 appraisals, file them with the court. Nowadays, the court even wants you to get approval of who the appraisers are first. Then you have to post a bond. Then you got to file your sale motion. And as you know, in bankruptcy, with the exception of the trend of quick cases, that's not going to happen quickly. Mm-hmm. So even if you walk in on day 1 and say, here it is, we have a buyer in hand, it's been shopped, the Chancery Court's going to say, market it again.
Wow. So they're not wishy-washy in the Delaware Chancery Court?
Not now. Right now, no. The Chancellor McCormick, the new head of the Chancery Court, is very concerned that the assignment process is being, the rule has become use an exception.
But nonetheless, even though they're strict, it's a popular venue, I gather.
It is and has been, but if the court, in my opinion, and this is not development specialist, this is my opinion, if the court is not going to look at the facts of the case and be willing to adjust the statutory process, then they'll kill the process. Mm-hmm. Now that doesn't mean don't get an appraisal, don't post a bond. That means if I have an emergency sale, then I better come in prepared with the facts to justify it. And the court needs to then look at those facts and say, okay, an exception to the statute is warranted.
Now, just a minute ago, you said something about courts adapting the law to meet the needs of the case. Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples of that?
We had a case recently where the assets are 2 security deposits with landlords, where the business failed because of COVID, and a liquor license that is in escrow. We asked the court to waive the appraisals. Mm-hmm. And the court chewed on it and thought about it and then said, okay, I guess you're right, we should waive the appraisals. There's really nothing to appraise. Yeah. But however, on the bond request, we want you to get a bond for the full amount of the security deposit that's at issue, even though you're not going to get all of it, and the liquor license.
Well, let me ask you this. One of the great features of a bankruptcy, even a Chapter 7, is the ability to sell assets free and clear. Mm-hmm. Is there any movement in ABCs in that direction?
There are a number of states that are using free and clear orders.
Really?
New Jersey being one of them.
Wow.
North Carolina has a free and clear capability. It has not, that concept hasn't been tested.
Well, I was going to say that just sounds to me like there could be some major problems with the contract clause of the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, I would now plead the fifth and say no argument from me. I think it is a huge problem. We were asked in one case, and I'm trying not to say all of our stuff, but just from years of experience, where we had a buyer want a free and clear order in Delaware. We warned them that we didn't think it was appropriate. They said, ask anyways, and the court gave it to them.
Yeah.
But would I promise somebody that they could get it? No. Wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that has always struck me about ABCs is that why do they exist in the first place? And when I ask myself that question, the answer comes back because the bankruptcy code is not the best statute for a lot of circumstances. It's expensive.
Yes.
You open a can of worms.
You get a trustee who you didn't want, who's going to make your life miserable as the principal of the debtor because he wants to look at everything you've done.
Yeah, and from what you're saying, it's sounding to me like ABCs, and I'd like for you to correct me if I'm wrong, are trying as best they can to move in the directions of simple Chapter 11s.
I would take you back even further than move to the recent trend. It's not really the Chapter 11 concept or the 363 concept. Assignments in the early days were a way for individual debtors to avoid going to the, quote, big city, end quote, to deal with their debts. Pennsylvania hadn't changed their statutes for that reason. Well, the farmers, we don't want to come into Pittsburgh. Assignments are a state law concept, and the states have the right to regulate debtor-creditor relations.
Right.
Separate than the bankruptcy code. Mm-hmm. And that's where the tension of preemption comes in. Is the state law or the state statute crossing into where the bankruptcy code governs?
Yeah. Well, this just seems to me to be more evidence that our bankruptcy code needs a lot of work. I mean, we had, God bless Congress and the ABI, which was really responsible for it, the subchapter 5, which was a godsend for smaller companies needing to reorganize.
And that came out of the Reform Commission that was formed in 2011,
right,
where Judge Harner, now bankruptcy judge Michelle Harner, was the reporter.
Right.
Bob Keach and Al Togut were the co-chairs. And the members of the commission were a who's who of bankruptcy.
Right.
And the small and medium enterprise concept was also something that the National Association of Credit Management was very concerned about because their members were getting caught up in all of these bankruptcies and they wanted a faster, more efficient way to deal with them.
Yeah.
So here comes subchapter 5. On top of subchapter 5, because of course our debt limit is set and expires in March at $7.5 million, out-of-court workouts are back.
Oh, really?
The old-fashioned call a meeting of creditors. I have secured debt. I have taxes. I don't have enough to keep the business going without the secured lender's consent. Give me a moratorium, and we'll work something out.
Yeah, but why don't the lenders just take it back?
They don't want to. They don't want the debt on their books as a write-off or a bad debt. They don't certainly want to take possession because they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Or it's contaminated and they don't know, now what do I do with a furniture manufacturer that has spray booths? I can't turn them on because now I'm operating. But as a secured creditor, I can protect my collateral. The debtor doesn't trust, the creditors don't trust. Here, somebody else go take it.
Yeah.
But I'll consent to the assignment because the assignee can liquidate it and get me my recovery.
Aha.
And I am not in bankruptcy where I now have to hire my lawyer, even though they hire him in an assignment, and go get relief from stay with a trustee who's just not ready to give up in case there might be value.
I see. So the assignee, for the benefit of creditors, is a insulation against the outside world, it sounds like.
Pretty much. The same as a sale by an assignee is deemed commercially reasonable under the Uniform Commercial Code and is insulation. It's not perfect protection, but it's insulation from a arm's length third party buyer being sued by creditors as a successor in interest.
Well, my goodness. All of this just seems to me to be a suggestion that we really need to look at all of our insolvency laws. I mean, frankly, it's a surprise to me that we don't already have a uniform law on ABCs. It might make sense, but I suppose states are jealous about their own systems. But, our bankruptcy works really well for very big companies
Yes.
and people with a lot of debt. But you know, somebody who makes $36,000 a year, heck, they can't even afford to go bankrupt.
Can't afford it. And a company that has $1 million in trade debt can't afford, they're lucky to afford a filing fee and a $1,500 retainer to a lawyer to file a 7.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know.
There was work that was started years ago on a model set of statutes. And there was discussion with the ABA and the Commercial Law League, and it never got any momentum. And it wasn't to create a uniform set of statutes, but it was to give states a framework to create a modern statute. It's out there, it's doable, the legislatures have to be interested, and the state bar has to be interested.
Yeah.
And that's back to a state-by-state issue.
Jeff, thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion, and I sure have learned an awful lot, and I very much appreciate it. ABCs, of course, will be fodder for upcoming ABI events and publications. To find out more when and where, have a look at abi.org on the internet for the latest updates on our publications and events. Thanks for tuning in, you there in the audience. In upcoming weeks, our Industry Viewpoints series, we will talk with other experts about the future of industries that are affected by our turbulent economic times. Until then, be well, stay safe, and good day.